things ABM and ABX. So specifically digging into the evolution of ABM to ABX. My name's Leanne Chescoe. I'm Senior Manager of the EMEA Marketing Region here at Demandbase. And today, we're going to be diving into this topic. So, we know as B2B sales and marketers that we're always evolving, and it's really time for our strategy to keep up with that. And we want to introduce the concept of account-based experience, which is really this next generation of account-based marketing. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking through the fundamentals of an ABX strategy, how you can turn your ABM strategy into an ABX strategy and why you should, how to align experiences to the account journey, and how to work with modern B2B buyers on their own terms. So lots of great questions that I've got for our two speakers who I'll introduce in just a second, but please do feel free to ask questions as we go as well. And we're going to run a poll as well, so which you should see in the chat. So we'll keep that running for a few minutes and then we'll look at the results in 5 to 10 minutes. But the poll question that we'd like to know is, which types of technologies do you currently use to support your ABM programs? And the 4 options are an ABM platform, intent, marketing automation, or sales automation. So just interested to see kind of where technology kind of sits within your strategy today. So we'll come to that. So let's get started. So I'm joined today by Jon Miller. He's our Chief Marketing and Product Officer here at Demandbase. And Jon has a long history of establishing and leading some of the most notable technology companies, including Marketo and Engagio. I'm also joined by Joel Harrison. He's the Editor-in-Chief and co-founder of B2B Marketing, and they are the leading provider of insight, best practice, and professional development information for B2B marketeers. Alongside this role, Joel is also a public speaker, panelist, commentator, and evangelist for all things B2B. So lots of great experience between Jon and Joel. So let's dive into it. Thanks both for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So I want to start by defining ABX, because that term or phrase may be new to some people. So can you just give us some examples of, what does ABX mean to you both? And I'll come to you first, Jon.
Yeah, I'll start with the simple definition, and then I think as you ask some more questions, we'll dive deeper into why this is the definition. But fundamentally, the definition of ABX is not that different from a lot of definitions of good ABM. I would say ABX is a go-to-market strategy. It means it's not a program, it's not a campaign, it's a strategy for how you run your go-to-market. It uses data and insights to orchestrate relevant, trusted interactions. So you'll know some themes there around account intelligence. And it's across marketing and sales actions throughout the B2B customer lifecycle. So it's not just a marketing program. It really is about the entire customer experience.
And Joel, same question to you. What does ABX mean to you?
I think it's a really fantastic collision of two of the hottest themes that we've had in B2B marketing for a number of years now, account-based marketing and customer experience. The irony, the difference between the two of them is, from my perspective as a kind of as a journalist and a marketing commentator, is that ABM has really taken off and gathered so much excitement and interest, whereas CX has kind of stuttered a bit and it hasn't really kind of been actionable on quite the same level. But I think it's fantastic to look at experience in the context of ABM, because it's so important, and you can't just treat the reason why ABM is so compelling is it's driving synergies and creating real reasons and ways in which account-based marketers and salespeople can work together. But it's about more than that, as Jon says. It's about much more than that in terms of the importance of all the actions, all the things that happen, all the things that need to take place and be good for account-based marketing, account-based activity to be successful. So it's a really welcome development. I'm always excited about how things develop and how trends change, and this is exciting development for me. Jon's always done some great work in terms of helping demonstrate how things develop. So it's an exciting topic, and I think it's a really welcome evolution of what has become such a critical aspect of B2B marketing in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of taking all the best kind of aspects, isn't it, of a CX kind of strategy and blending it with account-based marketing. So Jon, we know that you've written this book, The Definitive Guide on Everything Account-Based Experience. So we've got a lot of content in that book, and we've actually got a link. People can go and download that as well. So check out the chat for that. But what has driven this change for companies to move from an ABM to an ABX approach?
Yeah, I love the question because I can kind of tell the whole story of the evolution, and it really starts back when I was the co-founder of Marketo and running the marketing department there. And Marketo, we pioneered demand generation, for in many ways, where we would run campaigns and we'd get responses, but we wouldn't pass those leads over to the sales team until they were ready. We would nurture them and score them. And then what was great about this is it was good for the salespeople because they didn't have to call leads that didn't want to talk to them yet. Yeah. And it was really good for the buyers because they didn't get calls that they didn't want from sales. It was fundamentally, it was a good buyer experience. But what it didn't do is it didn't let us go after some companies that we were interested in. We'd run our campaigns, but not every account that we really wished we had would respond. And so at Marketo, we had to start experimenting with other outbound programs where we could reach out proactively to target accounts that were interested. That motion became known as account-based marketing. Finding big accounts and going after them. And, that was really good too, because it sort of helped us kind of, target big accounts. It was hard to do with Marketo, by the way, which is part of the reason I left to go start Engagio and then ultimately merged Engagio with Demandbase to form, we think, the ultimate platform. But, so I've spent the last 5 or 6 years thinking about ABM, practicing ABM, this kind of outbound motion. And I've used an analogy to explain the difference between demand gen and ABM. Demand gen is like fishing with a net. You run your campaigns, you catch fish, you don't care which fish you catch, you just care, did you catch enough fish? ABM was like fishing with the spear. We'd go find those big fish and we'd go after them. The analogy worked really, really well, but inherent in the analogy, I think, is fundamentally the key flaw of ABM when practiced traditionally. And that is we are reaching out to accounts regardless of whether they are interested in hearing from us, regardless of whether the timing is right. And so while ABM was targeted, it lost that respect for the buyer experience that the traditional demand generation had. To put simply, it doesn't feel very good to get poked by a spear. Mm. And so I started thinking about, is there a way to sort of merge the best of ABM, that precision, that targeting, the ability to go after accounts, with the respect for the buyer experience of traditional demand generation? And that's sort of where we coined and came up with this whole concept of account-based experience. The other driver of account-based experience, or ABX, we've already alluded to, and that's just in the name. It doesn't have the word marketing in the name. Another fatal flaw of account-based marketing is it makes people think it's just a marketing campaign. And as we've all learned and written about and know, it only works when it truly is a cross-functional go-to-market strategy. And I think the word ABX sort of is a bigger tent that invites more departments into it.
Absolutely. We're here talking about, we're not just talking about, as you said, marketing. It's involving sales, customer success, SDRs, any kind of revenue, customer-facing teams. And you've answered part of this already, Jon, but can you provide the audience with a little bit more detail on what are some of the fundamentals of an ABX strategy?
Yeah, at the core, it's about aligning how you're going to market with an account to where that account is in its journey. So if you've got a target account, one that you're interested in, they're a fit for you, but they're not showing any intent or awareness for you or your category, don't be spamming them with a bunch of SDR messages, right? That's not the right strategy for an account at that stage. Instead, focus on how am I going to build some awareness? How do I build my brand preference? And frankly, that's probably about emotion more than it is logic, And then as an account starts to engage, they move a little bit down, they're maybe aware of you, a little bit of light engagement, but still not showing buying signs. Still don't spam them yet. Instead, think about how can you move from emotion to logic and help to educate them with things like thought leadership and best practices. And then how do you find those magic moments? How do you get the right signals that say, hey, this account looks like it's actually now the right time, where they would not only want but appreciate a call from the company, and an opportunity to speak to us and engage. And if you can find those magic moments at the right time, you can reach out in a relevant, personalized way that's actually very constructive and helpful. And then you even continue into the opportunity and beyond, right? So it's all about that alignment, and what makes all that work, and frankly, why it wasn't possible 5 years ago, is just how much more account intelligence is available today.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to really understand what's happening at the account with your own data as well as third-party data like intent, and use that to intelligence to then align your go-to-market.
And I love that notion of magic moments. Definitely. I think that's a really key thing for people to kind of take away and think about. And I've definitely seen it work really well in practice, where all of that, you know, account intelligence, that intent piece has come through with, in an example, with an SDR outreach. Most recently, actually, we had a campaign a few weeks ago, and we had this magic moment where everything, like, we just had some great, good reason to reach out, and it was all about right timing. And and we're actually, you know, working the early stages of working that opportunity. But I think those magic moments, that's definitely a key thing for people to take away. So Joel, want to come to you next. So when you've spoken about ABM in the past, you've mentioned that the key now lies in finding a competitive advantage by turning data into actionable insight that impacts the customer experience. So how do revenue teams work together to use this insight? And how have you seen the skill sets of marketers in particular change over the years when it comes to an account-based approach?
Well, I mean, the key, thank you for quoting me. The key is absolutely fundamental that they have to work so close together. I mean, arguably, if they're not really working together on that basis, then you're not doing account-based marketing, and you can kid yourself, but you're not. And it has to be, a deeply grained philosophical approach and an understanding and a level and a collaborative approach, which we haven't really seen historically in B2B marketing. And the brands that are doing ABM successfully understand that, and not just in terms of, and it's a two-way process as well between sales and marketing teams. But I think if you're going to talk about ABX, it's probably, as Jon alluded, goes way beyond that as well. But it's kind of on a kind of real two-way street in terms of the depth of information, sharing data both ways, being really collaborative in terms of understanding what data you need to identify. And the point about magic moments is a great way of expressing those kind of sweet spots where opportunities are at their most fruitful. And I think it's also recognizing the different parts that different protagonists in that relationship play. Marketers are probably great at using some of or should be great at using some of those data tools which we spoke about. Also, salespeople have, I'm sure many of the good ones do use some of those tools, but also they're at the sharp end with their clients. They're able to provide anecdotes and insights and personal perspectives about what they know and what they feel works. And so getting that blend of those different responses is really, really powerful. And it's not just about getting in a room and just shouting at each other and just throwing stuff across the table. It's about building a relationship and a rapport where there's mutual respect, mutual understanding, and you're able to contextualize and utilize that knowledge in a productive way. And that's probably just accessing the knowledge is the easy bit. It's the building the relationship and building the actionable processes to make it work is more challenging, but that's where the magic happens.
Well said.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree with you. And I'm just thinking in terms of just how we've seen that in practice, in terms of that sales and marketing alignment, just across our customers and within our own practices as well at Demandbase. That works really well. And you absolutely have to be kind of acting as one team, essentially. So as I've said previously, the concept of ABM is not a new one. And most companies have some type of ABM approach to their marketing strategy. So firstly, to you, Jon, how can you turn your ABM strategy into an ABX strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing to kind of recognize here is that, ABM and ABX aren't actually different things. It's not actually that ABX is like better than ABM. In many ways, I think, the whole idea of just aligning your go-to-market to where they are in the journey is probably the way we should be practicing ABM all along.
Yeah.
Right. Because ABM has always been about relevance and insight and things like that. And I think it's just people got kind of excited and like, hey, I want this account. I'm going to go after them. So really, it's just the mindset, of how do I align my go-to-market to where they are, and how do I use intelligence to make that happen? And if you're not already doing it, really doing it with sales, And so it's just those little bitty tweaks that I think kind of turn maybe bad ABM into good ABX, but really they should just all be the same thing.
And Joel, do you have any sort of additions to that in your kind of opinion, or where you've seen or experience? Have you seen, is there a certain level of account-based maturity that an organization needs to be at before they adapt or evolve their account-based strategy?
I might go off on one here. So really, I could almost go even further than that. Say it's more a philosophy. It's a way of structuring and conceptualizing what marketers need and salespeople need to do. And it's definitely not a tactic you can just bolt on there. And I completely agree with John. It's it's about that. It's about how your mind works, how you think about those things. So and perhaps a way of making that happen is to kind of conceptualize it as a philosophy. But also, I was interested in what John said about, this is what we should always have been doing. This is it's not necessarily new. It's always been there. We just hadn't really had the recognition of it before, which is so resonant of what people were saying about account-based marketing 5 years ago. It's always been there. It's actually a kind of a synthesis and a kind of crystallization of what has always represented good B2B marketing. So I think that it's just funny that we're now drilling down a layer and seeing another layer of what we should always have been doing, and I don't think John's wrong in that at all. So I think that's fascinating to see that. In terms of, and then the actual question, I've now forgotten. Really, Leanne, can you remind me? I'm really sorry. I got so swept up in my own answer that I forgot.
Yeah, so the question was, is there a level of account-based maturity an organization needs to be at before they adapt or evolve their account-based strategy?
Okay, and that's a really good question. I'm sorry, that was incredibly rude of me. So I guess
good points.
My answer would be, it's not something that you could say, oh, I'm only going to pay attention to these other touch points and these other relevances at some point in the future. I think you have to start. It's really about a light bulb moment and going, I see this broader perspective. I see that the opportunities to have more influence and more resonance with my accounts now. And it's probably not so much around, as John says, making a big shift over. It's about acknowledging that bigger picture and seeking to find ways in which you can nudge it and tweak it in the right direction, and understand ways possibly in which and this is something we say generally about CX, where is your process breaking down? Where are your customers experiencing having bad experiences between marketing, sales, customer success, and anywhere else? Because arguably this plays across the whole brand in terms of as CX does generally. So there's no time. You can't really. You're doing it anyway, right? People are having an account-based experience already. It's just, the question is, are you recognizing that, and are you doing something about it? And if you're not, well, maybe now is quite a good time to start thinking about that and working out if there's areas where it's broken and what you can do about them. But the world shouldn't change overnight. It's about recognizing a way of being more successful in the future. That's how I position it.
Yeah, and I think it's just a smarter way of doing it as well. And I've heard some of our SDRs that I've worked with in the past saying, it's working smarter, not necessarily harder, in this account-based kind of approached way. So we're going to get to our poll responses in a second, but before we do that, I wanted to dig into some more specifics around the types of activities and programs that marketers should be doing, or perhaps stop doing, to embrace the future. So I'll come to you first, John, and get your thoughts on this.
I think, just a couple things that we do here at Demandbase ourselves. I think one is we've built a really awesome program that aligns our digital advertising to the buyer's journey. So we've mapped out the stages of the account journey. And at each stage, there's a different set of ads that are similar to what I was saying earlier, whether it's just building brand, it's about engaging with thought leadership, all the way down to accounts that are in open opportunities with us. We have very broad targeting, trying to build consensus and validation across the buying committee. So whether you're using display or LinkedIn or other advertising channels, just segmenting your accounts by buyer's journey stage is a great kind of early first step. A second one is, if we're obviously fans of intent data, here at Demandbase, intent is a really key piece of getting that magic moment to know when accounts are kind of in market and ready to buy. So, bringing intent into your overall program. And then the third, I think, is we've beat a dead horse. We're talking a lot about sales, and the question is, how do you start working with sales more effectively? And I think just one thing that every company can do is just define the 8 things that sales wishes they could know about their accounts. Hey, I have an open opportunity showing intent for a competitor. I have a target account and a VP just downloaded Jon's book, et cetera. Like, just list out a couple things and just start proactively alerting salespeople about those key insights. Just some basic things that we're doing here at Demandbase that get things moving in the right direction.
No, I love those examples, and we definitely do that ourselves. We call them ABM standups here, and we have a monthly meeting with our sales reps and their SDRs, and a few folks within marketing are involved in that as well. And going through some of the questions that Jon just provided, and really digging into some things like intent data and our target accounts visiting our website. We're having accounts showing no engagement. How can we work together to increase that and drive more engagement? But just having those regular sessions really helps, like, the salesperson feel supported, but you're working together as one team, as we've already said as well. So Joel, what about you? Any advice on the types of activities or programs that marketers can be doing?
I read this question earlier and I thought I'm gonna make the answer which annoys me most when I'm being the questioner, which is the answer is it depends. But it kind of does, in that it kind of depends on who you are, what kind of ABM you're doing, where you are in terms of maturity about those things. But I certainly wouldn't say that. And I was a session this morning for in our Propolis community where we were talking about the B2B Marketing Award shortlisted campaigns, and some great creativity and great activity going on there. And I don't think that anything that we've spoken about today, or in the kind of general philosophy of ABX, as I understand Jon's kind of framed it up, means that you should stop doing any of those kind of great creative campaigns. It's more around, it's less about the big picture and the creativity and the understanding of the customers in the macro perspective about putting those campaigns together. It's often as much around the small nudges and the understanding of the kind of nuances and subtleties of behavior, joining those dots and making them smoother, and understanding what the relationship looks like. And also, as you said, Leanne, making sure that your discussion includes customer success or account management if you have that function in your organization. If you're in a fee earner organization where those people are often responsible for relationships, how included are they? Do they understand what's happening? So making sure you're understanding the full ton of life cycle and nature of that particular relationship and accommodating that. It doesn't mean that you need to fundamentally change or pull apart the great ABM you're doing, or the way you devise that. It's more around, it's the subtleties of making those things work better and contributing small nudges to make a much better result overall.
Thank you. Before I go into the next question, which we're going to look at a little bit around how you're using or how to use technology in your ABX strategy, just wanted to share some of the results of our poll question. So just as a reminder, we asked, which types of technologies do you currently use to support your ABM programs? ABM platform, intent, marketing automation, or sales automation? And we're seeing 100% on ABM platforms. So that's pretty interesting. That poll's going to run on our Demandbase LinkedIn page for the next 24 hours. So it'll be interesting to see how, or if any of those results change, but that's what it's showing at the moment. So kind of segue into that kind of question then is, where and how should you be using technology in an ABX strategy? Jon, I'll come to you for this one first.
I mean, more than anything else, technology helps you scale. You don't need ABM or technology to sort of do early stages of ABX, but you definitely need it for some scale. So for example, we talked about account intelligence, the ability to sort of have a single view of the account that sort of spans, kind of everything your enterprise plus third-party data. You're going to want some technology for that, certainly if you're going to bring in third-party data like intent. And And then once you have that, you can use the data to help you find accounts, that are, where map them to where they are in the journey, start to really orchestrate interactions across channels. And then, last but not least is measure what's going on. And we'll talk about measurement in a second, but that's why I started Engagio, was measuring the stuff that's too hard without some technology.
And then Jon, what are your thoughts on using technology?
Yeah, I think Jon makes an arguable point around scale. I mean, everything, as soon as the more you use, the more you've focused on scale, the more using technology. And Jon's covered that really well. I think one thing that's worth adding possibly around is possibly less from a kind of executional perspective, but more than operational collaborative perspective. Particularly in these kind of still pandemic times. Are your collaborative internal workflow processes up to scratch? Are you providing the tools, resources, and facilities that your sales and marketing teams need to collaborate and share information effectively, and work together as a genuine team? I mean, those technologies have come on immeasurably in the last 12 months, and our expectations of them have come on incredibly. So there's a huge wealth of applications and service providers in those areas which are effective. And I know that so much around making sure that salespeople are effective is allowing them to access or create the right kind of content. That's one of the chief barriers that we see often in people talking about account-based marketing programs and success is the deployment or the creation of the right technology. So giving marketers access to that, or salespeople access to that, is pretty crucial. So there's loads of areas it can help, but as we always say, strategy first. Don't get sucked in by the kind of shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've spoken quite a lot in terms of sales and marketing alignment, and you've given some examples, but is there any other recommendations that you can give on how that relationship can be improved? Joel, I'll come to you first with this one.
Well, I mean, just kind of general transparency, collaboration, working well together, trying to cultivate those great team relationships in a way that you would normally, breaking down the barriers. The obvious thing, which is people have been saying to me since, Jon made the point earlier on about it's what we should have always been doing. This seems to be a recurring theme. One of the first things that people were saying to me when we started B2B marketing nearly 20 years ago is marketers don't spend enough time with salespeople. They should spend more time with salespeople. They should go to client calls. So that's still a problem today. You're still having marketers who don't have that exposure to their customers. So, as the expression goes, it's about walking in someone else's shoes for a while. And I've done it as an editor, as a journalist. You spend time with salespeople, and even if you know the customer yourself, which I often do, when you look at that conversation through the lens and through the eyes of the customer, you see it quite differently. So, those are fundamentals, no matter how much we use technology, I'm sure, to improve those things on top of it. But those are fundamentals.
And then, Jon, did you have any additional thoughts?
You already talked about my favorite one, which is the ABM standups.
Mm-hmm.
But, I really, it's such a great thing to do. I will re-emphasize it. We're not the only ones. Snowflake does this. Anaplan does this. Some of the, I think, best ABM practitioners out there have some program, and it's just sounds so simple. Like, get an ABM marketer and a salesperson and an SDR talking periodically about the target accounts. What's going on and what you're going to do. It just does magic for alignment, and it's just not hard. So I strongly recommend everybody does that.
Definitely, and it's great. We share this with customers all the time, and we've had some customers over here adopting it as well. So it's great to see that. I'm a huge fan of them. So final question, we've got probably just under a minute. So we'll get on to measurement. So what are some measures of success? So if you can share some, the types of metrics that organizations should be using to measure success of their account-based programs.
Do you want to go first?
I'll let Jon do that. I'll let Jon go on that one first, because I'm sure this is going to be, he's going to have much more to say on this than I am.
I mean, everybody, you always want to measure marketing if you can with pipeline and revenue, right? Just obviously that's what the CFO cares about. That's what the sales cares about. But, in these account-based programs, that's necessary but not sufficient for your measurement, because it takes a lot of time to develop these accounts, until they are ready for the magic moment to become pipeline. And so you need leading indicators. You need some set of metrics that say, hey, am I at least progressing towards pipeline and revenue? And so, my two favorite leading indicators, first one is just engagement. Are the right people from the right accounts spending more time with you? And that can be they're coming to your website more often, they're downloading your content more, but just in aggregate, like measure how much time the people from your accounts are engaging. If it's going up, you're right on the right track. And then the other metric I like to look at goes back to that account journey that I've talked about a couple times. We talked about how you have targeted qualified accounts, then the accounts that are showing intent, that are engaged, and that are actually then marketing qualified, and so on. We track that, and every month we are reporting on, hey, how many of our target accounts became engaged? How many of our target accounts became MQAs? And it's just like we used to do back in demand gen with MQLs and SQLs and all that kind of stuff, but just applying it to the account. So what's old is new again. It's just about trying to moving things into the account-based model.
And Joel, probably just a few seconds on this one because we're just a minute over.
Yeah, I think Jon makes great points as ever. But one of the things that often a lot of our members talk to us about is they're still in the early stages of ABM, and they're trying to just convince skeptical stakeholders that it's worth sticking with it. And so often it's less around the hard metrics. The softer metrics can be actually even more compelling. So build up your stock of things to show, as Jon says, you're moving in the right direction. And it won't be those hard metrics initially. It'll be softer things. And things like account engagement works seems to be a great example of that.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today, and to everyone else that joined our live. Some really good advice and tips, and hopefully people can start implementing that in their strategies today. Just a reminder to everybody that you can download our ABX guide. There is a link in the chat to do that. And also, if you want to meet us at the upcoming B2B Marketing Conference on the 3rd and 4th of November, there's also a discount code to do that. But with that, thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day.